Welcome to Busted Speakers, I'm Alex.
And I'm Cam.
And today we're reviewing the new album from Neil Young, Homegrown. Now, when I say new, it is newly released, but it's not newly recorded. In fact, this dates back to 1974. The history of this album's pretty interesting. It's been known to be a sort of one of those great unreleased albums, along with another Neil Young album, Chrome Dreams. Maybe not on the same level as Smile by the Beach Boys, but I had heard of it, and so now it's seen an archival release. Did you know much about this album's history, just before I go into it, Cam?
I didn't. I'd never actually heard of it. I've always been aware that Neil Young is a guy with an extensive archive, kind of like, I don't know, Prince or somebody like that. But I do have a lot of Neil Young albums, and I like what I've heard, but I'm not intimately familiar with his career trajectory or what he's shelved from when.
Yeah, and the fact that he shelves stuff after recording them for on the back burner is exactly why this album never saw release until now. Now, I don't know why it took until now, but why it didn't get released back in the day is because it's 1974. He just released On the Beach, which I think is one of his best albums ever, in the first half of that year. Then his relationship with actress Carrie Snodgrass, who also inspired some other songs like A Man Needs a Maid. She had inspired other stuff. They had broken up, and he started making songs recounting their breakup. Now, after almost completely finalizing this album, even had album artwork, he basically discovered Tonight's the Night, which he recorded in 2 days, and decided to release that instead, which we'll get into if that was a good decision or not in a minute, but, well, I'd say yes, because that's another great album. But Homegrown was just unreleased for ages. I mean, some songs from it he revisited and even used exact versions on this album for other albums, but essentially this is a complete prime peak era Neil Young album with largely unheard songs, or at least the sessions that they culled from found songs that were pretty much unreleased, and have released it now. To me, this is unexpected. Even though I had heard of it, I didn't think there was this many songs I had not heard of before. This is even more unknown stuff to me than Hitchhiker, so basically I'm floored. How did you find this album, Cam?
Well, not being overly familiar with Neil Young's music meant I'm also not overly familiar with his personal life, so the idea of Neil Young releasing a divorce breakup kind of album was definitely intriguing. He's one of those guys who's kind of the stereotypical hippie who just wrote about hippie subjects, and it doesn't really
kind of goes with the flow.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't think he's known for protest material or anything.
Well, somewhat. He did write some political stuff, more so with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, like Ohio and Southern Man. But by and large, you're right. He didn't really venture too much out of his comfort zone, which I think this album is. This is him kind of outside of his comfort zone. He said himself the songs on here scared him, which is, something.
Yeah, that definitely helped with the intrigue of this album. Yeah, the divorce theme is definitely strong on the first side of the record.
Yeah, especially the song Separate Ways. I mean, that song speaks of them going their separate ways.
Yeah, and honestly, that one kind of runs right into the second track, Try, at least just when I'm listening to it.
Pretty much, yeah. I could see why they were positioned together, especially if you want the two songs that are informed directly by the breakup to go 1 and 2 together.
Yeah, that was a great decision.
Oh, no, the first time I heard Separate Ways, I was floored. I'm telling you, this has 7 to 8 just classic Neil Young songs on it, and I feel like I'm fair enough in saying they're classic because they are from 74. This is prime Neil Young material. He did release an album last year called Colorado, but this is a bigger deal to me than that. Separate Ways obviously speaks of the breakup and them going their separate ways. And did you know that the two songs Separate Ways and Try have Levon Helm on the drums from the band?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, rest in peace Levon Helm, but yeah, it's great to hear him drum again. Obviously he was a vocalist with the band as well, but he was a damn good drummer. And there's also another song that has Robbie Robertson on it, I think White Line. So 2 songs with 2 members of the band. I didn't even know he played with the band that much.
Yeah, neither did I.
Yeah. There is some material here I can see why it wasn't released. Like, the song Florida. What did you think of that when you heard it?
That definitely caught me off guard. Like, I was gonna ask you, like, is Neil like really known for like slam poetry every now and then?
Not really. His words can be quite poetic, obviously, but to me, this was like kind of ahead of its time. Like, he's talking spoken word over a sort of drone squealing noise. I know people like the Velvet Underground had songs like this, or at least had components of songs like this, but Neil wouldn't make songs like this until about 2010 or the 90s. He has his 2010 album Le Noise that has sort of loud, drony guitar noises and sort of half spoken word stuff, kind of experimental. But this is kind of ahead of its time, but I can also see why, this is not a song to revisit, really. Like, if he's ever short for tracks for an album, I could see why he didn't release this, even though it's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I could spend years trying to figure out exactly why he decided to include it on this album. Like, maybe it was.
I mean, it's historical. Maybe he got a kick out of hearing it again. This is definitely the type of song he'd completely forget he made, like, 2 days after recording it.
Yeah, I mean, with another track on this one titled White Line, I can kind of assume why that is.
Yeah, that's right. And the funny white line coming right after a song called We Don't Smoke It No More.
Oh yeah, I had a feeling that one was totally sarcastic.
You don't make a song like We Don't Smoke It No More unless you've smoked it some more.
Oh yeah.
That song is kind of fun, to be honest. I could definitely see it as a sort of throwaway track, but it's kind of a fun, raucous, barroom boogie type tune. Again, it's another one I can definitely see why they didn't release it, because even though the lyrics kind of blatantly say are kind of anti-drug, it's so tongue-in-cheek that, would this get released? I can see why it was shelved for a while.
Yeah, so there's definitely a couple of oddities on this album. I don't know if a couple is like more than expected for a Neil Young release.
Well, even the song Mexico is really lovely, but it doesn't feel fully fleshed out at only 1 minute 40. Like, even though it's a really lovely piano ballad, I can definitely see it could have been fleshed out a bit more, but I think he's left it a bit too late to do that by now.
Yeah, probably, but it is kind of an interesting coda to Separate Ways and Try.
Yeah, especially the second half of Try had some piano in there, so it's a nice musical link. How aware were you of the songs that had been released from this album? Those being Love is a Rose, which was released on the Decade compilation. I think Star of Bethlehem, was on American Stars and Bars. And Little Win would not see release until 1980 on the Hawks and Doves album as the opening track. So weird how just some of these songs leaked out there. I don't know if he had archives at that point or if he just, oh yeah, I had that song. That'd be nice here.
Yeah, I don't know. And then, like, I'm looking at Genius right now, and they say White Line is from Songs for Judy, so...
Songs for Judy, I think he might have re-recorded it.
Okay.
Like, in 2016 or whenever Songs for Judy came out. So, this is the original 74 recording, so to me, this is more valuable.
I gotcha. Yeah.
I see that wine glasses were used to create the drone sound on Florida.
That makes sense. I was like,
Yeah,
it's not quite like guitar feedback, but I can't imagine what else it is.
No. The only other time I've ever heard of people doing that is Pink Floyd did it a little bit on the Wish You Were Here. The original concept of that was using household objects to make noises, and they made sort of dissonant like noises out of household objects like wine glasses. So
I never knew that.
there you go.
Yeah, so I'm getting back to the original question. I think the only one I would have heard was Love is a Rose, because I think Decade was my first Neil Young acquisition.
And that is a compilation that is seen as a classic compilation.
Yeah, one of the all-time greats.
Just because it does have some unreleased tracks like that one on it.
Yeah. And then I just picked up American Stars and Bars, and I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, so I don't know that version of Star of Bethlehem.
American Stars and Bars also has a different version of Homegrown on it, a more countrified version.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking, like, I'm so glad there's an alternative version of Homegrown on here that rocks out a lot more than the country version, because even though the country version is quite good, it's not... This one rocks a lot more. This one is definitely more of a Neil Young type song to me.
Like, is the difference between the two about as big as the rock and country versions of Honky Tonk Women?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny because even though there are so many great songs on here, I'm convinced that Little Win is still the best song on here, even though I had heard it before. I know it's short, but there's something about the harmonica intro that is really great and atmospheric, and I've never heard Neil sing in a more raw and like breathy voice than this. So I'm glad to see it repurposed for this album and back in its original context, because it really does feel out of place on the 1980 Neil Young album, even though it is by far the best track on it. Any other favourites that we haven't mentioned?
Not really. Like, that first four, actually, the first five is just a great set of songs. Great sequencing.
Broken by Florida.
Yeah, like, we don't need to discuss Florida. Like, any of those first five, I think, are a great, starting point for somebody who isn't so much into Neil like I am. And I'm sure there's definite, like you've been saying through this whole discussion, like, there's definitely a lot of intrigue for a diehard Neil Young fan in the back half of the album.
Yeah, like Vacancy is a really great song, and Kansas as well. And that's a really nice song after Florida. Like, there's not much to say here. A lot of these are like standard Neil Young songs that you'd almost expect him to have made on the side, which is really good. But, other than Florida, there's nothing like truly surprising on here. This is just a really nice release. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it's got a new release. I was surprised by how great this sounds. Like, this is produced beautifully, as if like made today. Do you think some restoration work was done on here?
It could be. I mean, if the tapes are that old, then I can't imagine what it would take to keep, 40, 50-year-old tapes in, usable condition.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so do we want to rate this in our normal way? Like, it is an album, we've reviewed it. Is it fair to still review it as an archival release with a score?
I mean, once I get the CD in my hand, because I pre-ordered it, I'm going to rate it on my RYM account. But, yeah, I don't know. We never really dealt with an archival release, have we?
Not really. To me, this is great. This stands really well in between On the Beach and Tonight's the Night. Do you think he made the right decision in releasing Tonight's the Night rather than this? Going back to that question.
That's one of those I haven't heard all that often. I do remember reading that he called this one the bridge between Harvest and Comes a Time. What do you think about that assessment?
Definitely in like the acoustic side of it, definitely bridges that gap a lot better, because without that his discography is a lot heavier in between, so it's a nice bridge, and I'm glad it exists now for his discography. This is just a lost classic album to me. It's on the 9 out of 10 level. I mean, a lot of the best songs are, but then there's also Florida, which might bring it down a tad, but in general, it's in the 8 to 9 out of 10 level. Very high quality stuff. Largely doesn't feel unfinished or unreleased. If this feels like it could have existed back in the 70s and would have been one of his better albums. So I guess we're not rating it properly. Okay.
Alright, if that's how you feel about it. Okay, and that wraps us up with Neil Young's Homegrown. Thanks for tuning in to Busted Speakers, everybody. You can follow us on Twitter at _Busted Speakers. You can follow me on Twitter at SubProspector. Leave us a like if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more album reviews, and we will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.